Hello and welcome to Freed Indeed Live. I'm your host, Kevin J. N. Hughes, and I'm joined today by Tim Kirby. He is our special guest from Moscow, Russia today. And Tim is our brother in Christ, and he also has a really interesting and kind of unique story that I thought would be fun to kind of explore and share. So, Tim, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, and then we can get into kind of your story of your journey into
hmm
Orthodoxy and all those things.
Hi, real quick. So I was born in the United States, from Cleveland, Ohio. Things there didn't go quite the way I wanted to. I became a U.S. Peace Corps volunteer in Kazakhstan for 2 years. Really liked the lifestyle. Went back to America. Didn't quite like the lifestyle as I remembered it, and so I worked at a printing factory, saved money, went to Moscow, and sort of the rest was history. What do I do now? Well, in the past, I worked in the computer industry. I mean, the video game industry, I should say more properly. I'm not a computer expert, that's for sure. I did that for a few years. Now my current profession is working in the media. However, I also play pro American football in the big leagues. Although, as you can see by my graying hair, I'm a little bit old to start, so I'm in the reserves of the Moscow Spartans, the best team in Russia that there has been for the last 3 or 4 years. So I'm proud of that. And yeah, so that's how things worked out.
All right. So, to kind of start off with, how did you come to know Orthodox Christianity? Did you come into Orthodoxy while you were in America, or how did all that play out?
No, and I'd also like to thank you. This is finally a chance I can talk about something different when it comes to the question of how I wound up in Russia and about my past, because usually everything is a sort of standard 10 or 20 questions about why did I move to Russia that I have to answer pretty much every day of my life. So this is thrilling. This is absolutely thrilling. Finally, some diversity. So, anyways, I can tell you one thing that in the part of America I was from, the line between forms of Christianity, so that's Ohio, Northeast Ohio, was a lot more blurred. Okay. In fact, generally, a lot of the people that I was around were really unclear about even terminology. Like, you talk to someone and be like, my grandmother's Catholic, and they'd be like, is that like Christian Catholic or like something else Catholic? Like very, 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 very confused, very little structure or real recognition of the rules. So my family is overall Catholic. However, there were weird periods where, like, my one grandmother, so I've been told, went to an Orthodox church just because it became more convenient for a while.
Interesting.
Again, very blurry, very vague. That grandmother was from the side that came from what is today Ukraine, but was historically always part of Russia. The other grandmother is from the southeast corner of Poland, roughly speaking. Again, roughly speaking, things when it comes to family histories are usually not wrapped up so nice and neatly with a ribbon, but that's the way it was. So, anyways, I can tell you one thing that my grandmother, and as someone who works in the media now, and as someone who speaks in the public in Russia now, I sometimes use my grandmother. You know, God rest her soul. She took care of me a lot as a child and really helped me out. But we have to say the truth, and the truth is she was sort of the perfect example of someone who was completely inefficient at carrying on Christianity into the future. Her idea of Christianity through with her was then mostly Catholic, but that we'll talk about Orthodoxy a little bit in a moment. Overall, her thing was, you know, the old school, you have to go to church. Why? Because you have to. Why? Because I don't know, God loves you and you have to. Like, a lot of that, just you have to, this is the thing you must do. And it's like, well, we don't eat fish on what is it? Or you have to eat fish on Fridays. Why?
Right.
Well, you know, and so basically you can imagine anything, but ultimately her argumentation for everything was some sort of feelings based, well, you kind of have to, without any explanation, right? And so, in a lot of ways, my grandmother and my own, but more so my own narcissism, arrogance, and other flaws led me down a path where I was like 18. I was the militant atheist guy. I was that really annoying atheist guy who would hear like two Muslims talking at a cafe and be like, you know, let's break down all the scientific inaccuracies in the Quran. I was that prick. So time goes forward, right? And I find myself in Kazakhstan as a Peace Corps volunteer, sort of a stepping stone to a life, ultimately in Russia, because the overwhelming majority of people in Kazakhstan speak Russian, and it was fun and interesting. And we were kind of asked, I was starting to kind of slip away from this like hardcore atheist guy, because right before that, I kind of noticed this weird thing of like the way I kind of see the world, especially from a political standpoint and ideological standpoint, even back then, really lines up more with people who are religious than who aren't. And so I was already kind of sort of in the mode at that point. It was like, well, I'm still a hardcore atheist, but to be honest, I don't really want to live with hardcore atheists. So it's kind of like, well, I guess that's just the way the world works. This is a good system for people, whatever. And then on what was it, January 18th or January 19th? I'm really bad with dates and names. But anyways, thankfully your name's written on the screen, which is awesome. But anyways, I did the sort of what is it? The I have to say this in a non-sarcastic sounding way. This is the problem when you're from Cleveland. Everything you say sounds sarcastic, even when you're not being sarcastic. I wanted to say took the plunge, but that sounds very trivial. The thing where you get baptized in the icy waters on January 18th or 19th, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So I did that in Kazakhstan, but I was kind of like, I don't know, what am I doing? Why am I? It wasn't really like I had this deep ideological shift, other than that thing of just sort of acknowledging that I'd rather live in Kazakhstan with like hardcore Muslims than with
Right.
atheists in the West. Okay. Besides that, I wasn't really there. But after I kind of got out of the water, I said did the 1, 2, 3 thing. They actually give everyone a vodka shot and a pickle, although it is a religious holiday. But anyways, the vodka hits me, and I sort of went into like a different universe. I don't know. I just sort of like kind of almost blanked out or something. And when I came out of it, from that point on, over time, I was like, yeah, this is real. This is really,
Hmm.
really real. I just got baptized into it, and this is legit real. All this stuff, all of the again, stuff, that's not a really good term to use. All of
That's
the
okay.
massive amounts of, again, I'd want to say, because I'm a modern person, lore. It isn't lore because it's real. Oh man, I'm losing the terminology battle with you here, brother. The massive amounts will just say information. When you
Right.
combine between what Christ actually did, we have the Bible, we have a lot of commentaries from saints and other priests, and you combine this all into this absolutely titanic body of information. It's true.
Right.
And that's where you get to, and you're like, okay, I got to put this whole atheist narcissistic thing aside. And also here, for some of your viewers, what they might also get from someone who lives in Russia, this is another thing where this wouldn't have happened in America, is that in Russia, religion and science are two completely separate things. So I'm sure some of your viewers have seen, oh, I don't know, maybe that like Protestant guy, that Kent Hovind guy who likes to debate people over religion. Or I recently even saw on the Valuetainment, is it called, where Patrick Bet Davis was in some sort of like debate with Muslims with some other guys. But basically, you get in the West, like people have to sort of try to trick religion into being boxed into some sort of science. And they're always like, well, the description in the Quran of how the sun moves across the sky is completely inaccurate. Or in the Bible, in the one gospel, Jesus cries out, God, why have you forsaken me? But in the other ones, he doesn't. They try to get into this very like almost legalistic or
Right.
scientific thing, but those have nothing to do with something that's sort of inherently like philosophical or ideological. These are very separate. And in Russia, that's natural and the default position. and it makes it a lot easier to live here. It also makes it a lot of ways being religious within your own mind a lot easier, because you understand that people, like, there's a sort of scientific side of things, but there's also a human side of things. And in the West, we've sort of convinced ourselves that there's only scientific rationalism. There isn't this
Right.
necessity that there's an idea answer for things. It's like, okay, we say, well, what is ice? Ice is water that is cold enough to be frozen. But then, of course, ice is something that's cold. Ice represents cold colors on the color spectrum.
Right.
Ice is something we associate with certain countries, but don't associate with other countries. Ice is something that we can use in a lot of examples because it can change into water given enough heat. There's or the fact that it's kind of hard, but it's also one of the easiest things to crack. There's
Right.
all sorts of like ideas and philosophy and interpretation of ice that we can have. And in the West, no.
Right.
No, scientific rationalism. Ice is just water that's cold enough to be solid, nothing more. And it's really nice living here, man. This is one of those things where it's really hard to explain to people why I live here, because trust me, they ask. Because it's so abstract. Yeah.
So that's really interesting. To go back a little bit, so how did you get into the Peace Corps to begin with? Like, what drove you that direction?
Well, near the end of my university studies, I kind of saw that my life wasn't really going to go anywhere. So I heard about it in sort of like my last year at the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. So I do have a bachelor's degree. That's nice. But I was kind of stuck in the cycle where my life was like, I actually did find design work. So I had a design degree and I kind of was a freelance designer. But I mean, you're working 48 hours a week still, or maybe even more. And ultimately, life boils down to maybe some beers on Friday at home and
Right.
cheeseburgers. And that's it. There's nothing, there's just nothing. I was like, wow, this is a real dead end here. And so because I am from the ghetto, so I was also raised in an environment, well, you don't hear it from the way I speak anymore. I was raised in an environment where almost everyone was black and I was not. And so I kind of grew up in some ways stuck in between cultures, because when you go away from the ghetto, all of a sudden things become very, like, the whole white Protestant world didn't really float me either, and nor did I ever
Right.
fit into it. Because I guess, as you would probably know, I don't know, when you grow up in the black community, this isn't to portray black people as being barbarous or something. In fact, it's something that is ultimately true, and in one way that they're vastly wiser than us, is they kind of understand that might makes right, man.
Right.
And
Right.
that's one of those things where you get out of this, you go to this like one thing I had this one girlfriend from another school, and like I took her to some sort of like school event or whatever, and some guy kind of just like started making fun of me, like right in front of her. Like, and when you go in like a black neighborhood, no one
Right.
talks smack unless they're ready to go. And
Right.
but the guy was tiny. So I was so stunned because I was so out of my universe that I was in. I was like, but but how? You're like 2 feet tall. You can't do
Right.
that. You know what I mean? I'm just like, what is going on? Like, oh, that's one example, but there's a lot of them where when you sort of grow up in an environment that is more might makes right, keep your damn yap shut. What are some other
Right.
things? Man, there's a lot of these little nuances about that kind of stuff. Oh, also, don't rat people out. That's
Right.
another thing that makes Black America is actually very much like Russia in that thing. Yeah, as soon as you go into white Protestant land, everyone's calling the cops on everyone else because somebody
Right.
farted, right? Yeah. So, anyways, I really found myself stuck between these sort of two cultures where obviously I'm never going to look like a black guy, and I am never going to fit into white guy Protestant khakis with white tennis shoes land either. And so I sort of was like, okay, well, what else can I do? All my ancestors came from Eastern Europe. And so that was
Interesting.
the real big motivator. And Peace Corps was essentially a way to live in Eastern Europe with a golden parachute. Because essentially, at any moment when you're in Peace Corps, you can quit if you want. I didn't, of
Right.
course. But like 1/3 of Peace Corps volunteers actually don't make it. They don't survive till the end. The
Interesting.
casualty rate is extremely high.
Huh. Why is that? Just really difficult work?
I don't think that the average person who a Peace Corps, like if Peace Corps appeals to someone, they generally tend to be more on the liberal side of the spectrum. and like
Mm,
want to help people. But also when you're on the liberal side of the spectrum, you need like, I need emotional support and I'm
right.
scared and all this other stuff. And for me, like, because I'm kind of one of the people from the streets, it's like, uh, oh no, life is somewhat scary. Something bad could happen to me. Oh, you don't say. So it really just has to do with like things that are beyond my comprehension. Like for example, um, due to living overseas, was not able to attend the funeral of either of my grandmothers. Okay, that's bad,
Oh,
but it is the way it is, right? And
right,
other people who I was with Peace Corps volunteers with, like when their grandmother or father died, they had like a psychological breakdown and quit. Like, I don't know. I guess it's also too, I should say, people who have my last name are from my family. That is not someone dying who's also elderly, right? So it's not like someone's sister dies and the kids are alone and they could be taken by child protective services. It's not like that.
right,
Like someone who was really old, they went to the end. It'd be good from a especially spiritual standpoint to attend the funeral, but it's not really going to change anything. So, anyways, again, you see, I have this sort of more cold-blooded mentality, which is maybe better suited to this idea of dropping you in a foreign country with
right,
abstract goals and no money. However, I can't say about my more liberal colleagues. They were much better at, say, like organizing community events and like
right,
doing something to like automatically, almost instinctively, in a really friendly, non-threatening way, spread liberal values. Again, I'm not saying that the Peace Corps ever, in fact, they really never told us to ever propagandize anything, but most people were naturally inclined to do that. Like,
right.
you know what I mean? Sorry, I'm kind of dominating the interview here, but
No,
I can
you're
just tell you
good. You're
one thing
totally good.
is that if you ever get like someone who's like super liberal, let's just say I used to watch this one video series on China. Let's not mention the name of it because that's not important.
Okay.
But the guys filmed a lot of videos about China and they're like, we like our lives in China. They're like Western guys, right? But, in China, well, there's so much censorship. But in China, they really are harsh towards women who don't have a kid by 30. And so subconsciously, there's, even though they like China, supposedly, they consider moving there to be the right decision. They're sort of on this quest to spread their liberalism. It's kind
Right,
of like the opposite of how, at least Fox News accuses people from South America of coming to America for wealth, but then they kind of have like red communist values. You see what I mean? It's kind of
right,
the same
right.
thing, but Western people going elsewhere. And so in that sense, the Peace Corps, everyone was probably way more successful than I was. Because, man, I'm not like, let's, sing Kumbaya under the sun with a bunch of kids and read books. Like, I was more
Right.
concrete. Like, I have this thing to do. I'll do that. I'll do the bare minimum. And let's do this thing here. But on the other hand, when I finished my term, the woman who was sort of like my boss, you could say, she was like, Tim, you didn't really do anything, but you didn't call to complain once, and you are the only one.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, because other
Yeah.
people, they even organized like an psychological like system where you could call someone sort of kind of anonymously, almost like a Catholic priest taking confession, of other volunteers from other groups, and sort of like have an anonymous, the volunteer would work like a psychologist with you. And I think they sometimes even used real professional psychologists for
Really?
people. And for me, that's just like, you come from the hood, you're like, come on, no, 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 my brother, no. I'm not gonna call anybody to talk about how I had like a bad day or I'm annoyed about stuff. Yeah, life's hard, whatever.
Right, exactly.
You know,
Life's hard, we move on.
yeah. No, I
So,
don't blame people. Life's hard, man. It can be really hard, and I bet for a lot
right,
of people it was stressful. But what, you got to do something about it, or you quit, and people did. So there you go.
right. So, while you're over there in Kazakhstan, you joined the Orthodox Church. What what was that kind of like? Because, I've joined the Orthodox Church here in the US, but I'll bet it's very different in a Muslim country. So, can you speak to that a little bit as well?
Not in the former Soviet Union and a lot of places.
Okay.
One of these other myths that comes up, especially like I mentioned that sort of debate between Patrick Bet Davis and these like Muslim guys with some other Protestants there, that, or when my homie Jordan Peterson, when he talks about religion and brings up Islam and stuff, there's this really sort of projected way of looking at things. Example: one of the big victims of the war in Syria and Iraq were actually Arab Christians, because
Mm-hmm.
the can of worms got opened up, and then all the nutcases had money and the proper armaments and all that. And that's when a lot of Arab Christians really suffered. But then it begs the question, is if in, say, from the post 9/11 period to present, Arab Christians were one of the biggest victims of this sort of the consequences of the war on terror, that means that they lived there for century upon century without being murdered by anyone before that.
Right.
Food for thought. Food for thought. So when sort of the former Soviet Union, you kind of get into that thing where there's this sort of set of maybe unspoken rules that are, well, they do exist in law, but people don't really talk about them. About how society can work with multiple religions that tend to be pretty mutually exclusive in their attitude towards other religions. And so in Kazakhstan, being Christian was never, ever, ever a problem. There are plenty of churches, especially in the north of the country. In the south, there are just so few Christians that there just aren't churches. You know what I mean? There's
Right.
just, but going into a church, visiting one, praying, being Christian, having the Bible at home is a zero problem, zero censorship of Orthodoxy, at least as of now. Not
That's
enough State
awesome.
Department dollars yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's awesome. I love hearing that. So, and that's really good for probably my audience to hear too, because, in America, like you were saying, we have this picture in our head of the way that the world is outside of America, and it's good to challenge that a little bit.
Oh yeah.
So now I am gonna kind of ask you probably the 20 questions that you always get, or at least a few of those 20
Oh,
questions.
sure thing. But one thing I just have to tell you,
So,
if they come out about religion, remember, I don't claim to be Jay Dyer. Okay, I'm a
okay.
believer, but I am not a priest. I am not an enlightened Orthodox like visionary. Okay, I'm at the bottom of the ladder. Just to be honest.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Well, I actually want to change gears a little bit. I've enjoyed learning about your journey to Orthodoxy, but I do want to also learn about you are an American who's moved to Russia, and as an Orthodox Christian with, let's say, alternative political views and different things, one of the things that people often say to folks like me is, well, if you don't like our political system here, why don't you go move to Russia or whatever? Now they
Well,
say that sarcastically, but you actually did.
yeah.
Um, so you've actually sort of put put your money where your mouth is, so to speak, as far
Mm-hmm.
as living out my worldview.
Yeah.
According to these people, anyway. So I would love to know more about that. Like, what influenced the decision to move to Russia? I'd like to know all about, life in Russia, all about kind of how you go about moving to Russia, how you go about playing American football in Russia. I
Oh,
want to know your story. I
all
want to
right.
know your
Well,
story.
the first thing is because I've written about politics and ideology for many years, even professionally. I can tell you that one of these things that they tell you about, if you don't like it, America, love it or leave it, right? We've heard
Right.
that one. Well, the one thing is that you probably haven't heard this anywhere else, because I think I might be the author of this idea, although I can't really check it out. But my personal Kirbian concept of freedom is that freedom is actually when someone is in agreement with society. So, say, for example, maybe if we drop the average American in Saudi Arabia, especially, I'd say probably more the average woman in Saudi Arabia, she's going to be like, this uniform, what am I doing? I'm not supposed to go out by myself. What are with all these rules? During Ramadan, can't even buy something to eat. What's this? However, if we take this a different person who's really, really, passionate about the particular brand of Islam that's sort of in the actual Arabian Peninsula there, and we shove him down there, he's going to be like, oh my goodness, everything is the way it should be. I agree with everyone.
Right.
He's going to feel free. He's going to feel amazed that finally he has days off every Friday so he can go to his mosque or whatever. And that's just one example, but ultimately, seriously, freedom is really a reflection of whether we're in agreement with society, if the things around us make sense, if we're sort of part of it. And so if you live alone in a hut somewhere and you're the only Orthodox person, then it really does make sense to move to Russia or somewhere else where Orthodoxy is at least strong. To a degree, I could be falling into some sort of Russian jingoist trap, but we really believe here that we're sort of the last Christian nation for now, that pretty much everywhere else has been tainted beyond recognition. And maybe that's unfair to people in like Greece or Bulgaria, but that's kind of the way Russia works. So maybe depending on your worldview, Bulgaria and Greece would be awesome options too. But ultimately, it looks like the sort of Christians of the world need to rally around Russia, because it's a lot easier to believe in the faith when the government isn't against you, or the government
Right.
kind of sort of agrees with you about it. There you go.
I love it. I love it. It's interesting you say that, because I have noticed that, like, even outside of Orthodoxy, just people who really love the Christian faith, really love their Christian faith, do actually feel this kind of draw towards, kind of, at least in kind of a secret way, siding with Russia kind of in their
Yeah.
hearts. And then sort of, they don't want to say it publicly though, because that's such an unpopular position in
Mhm.
America now. But it's like, if you do vocalize this position, then you'll get, 10 people, oh, you're so stupid, blah, blah, blah. And then a little bit later, 5 people will come up to you and be like, hey, man, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
so
that's kind
funny.
of it, man. That's the whole thing about like remaining sort of silent there. We remain silent, the world kind of looks one way. Sometimes when we open our mouths, the world looks a different way. And that's
Right,
also a fact of tribalism. It sort of depends. You talk to someone and what deep down really matters to them. If it's the true message of Christ that's delivered to us through the body of Christ, that is the Orthodox Church, if that's sort of number one on your identity
right,
pyramid, then of course you're going to be inclined towards today's Russia and its foreign policy. If it's something where that's kind of deep on your hierarchy of identity there, and you really, really prioritize Americanness as number one, even if you really don't like the government, even if there's a lot of problems in America, it's like, well, this is where I'm from. I like
right.
the food. I speak the same language, because trust me, having to speak a foreign language every day gets old. So there are definitely some reasons why people would stay. Yeah.
Right. Was it difficult for you to learn Russian, or did it come pretty naturally?
I don't think any language would come naturally for me. I think it's just been sort of a long process. It's like I tell people that one year when I went home to visit, my father was sort of like, Tim, I got a surprise for you. Tomorrow I got 15 tons of gravel coming for you. Since you're here for 3 weeks, I think you'll make it. Because they have a gravel driveway and these gravel paths. And so I had to shovel 15 tons of gravel. And yeah, I guess it was hard, but it was just sort of a matter of just like doing it,
Right. You just
and
get
that's
through it.
kind of the way the language is. You just kind of have to keep doing it. And it's kind of the same thing over and over again. And it's just a really long slog, in my opinion, language learning. And that's why so many people give up, because it's
Right.
just tedious. It's kind of like one thing where today just got back from football practice before this interview. Something about having a ball makes running fun. Running in like a circle
Right.
or an oval just to run, I can't do it. I psychologically just can't do it.
Right.
So, it's kind of that factor. So,
Right. But you put a ball in your hands and suddenly it feels, well, I think
yeah.
that has to do with, like, having a goal. It's like working out is painful and you don't want to do it, But then if you have a goal like winning a game or being part of a team or these things, then all of a sudden working out kind of takes on a different dimension. It's like, oh, now I have something I'm striving towards.
Yeah.
Um, so how did you I had never heard until we started talking. I had never heard of the fact that there's actually an American football league in Russia as well. So I
Oh yeah.
definitely want to learn about that. So how did the Russian football league get started and how did you get involved in that?
Oh, well, that was like 30 years ago, man. This Russian League of American Football, which has now been rebranded as of a few years ago to the Eastern European Super League of American Football. You can watch some of the big matches, game of the week matches from this season on rumble.com. So if you look for EESL on Rumble, you should find it. But how I got involved was I kind of met through, I don't even remember how, some other American guy here who played, and he was like, come out for the like open training day. So that's kind of this season. Ironically, the Russian season is weird. This is now the off season. Okay. It's like the opposite because everything in Russia
Right.
is backwards. Off season in fall. Makes sense. Okay. But so, anyways, at some point in early fall, there's an open training to join our team. And they sort of take a lot of guys and they kind of whittle it down. And I sort of did the open training day as sort of just like a fun kind of goof. I really didn't think I'd be able to make it or anything. But when I looked at the list of the guys who made it to kind of go on to the next phase, my name was kind of second to the last on the list, man. And I decided that after I had some really, really, let's just say brutal personal problems up until that point, my life kind of needed a major change. So we kind of talked about the changes maybe spiritually. This was more of a physical change. Because I used to work on the radio. I did the morning zoo for many years here as like,
Oh wow.
it's like the equivalent of like, I am funny foreign guy. Look at me say crazy things. I am, but I was second microphone. If for those of you might be familiar with Howard Stern, I was sort of the, I don't know, one of the background people like Jackie the Joke Man or Baba Booey or all those other characters that he had on. Our format was kind of like Howard Stern, but way more teenager than adult. Okay, in terms of its content. So the content was something we could, get away with in Russia. And that really pretty much killed me because I'm a real night owl, man. And I essentially had to drink a lot to knock myself unconscious to wake up at 5 a.m. So
Right.
after, 5 years of no physical activity, and, every time I had to go to work, I had to just drink myself into a stupor. I was just dead, and so this whole football thing was a real restart. The hard part was,
That's
as I
awesome.
started going, I knew I'd hurt something. And so I wound up really severely breaking one finger. So this finger don't work, it don't move, it's dead on my hand. So I had to go in and get operations done, and they put in like some metal pins in it for a long time. But I really did, for some reason, there was something sort of again uh, deep that was calling me to sort of do this because one of my dreams as a kid was to grow up and play American football.
Right.
Unfortunately, the high school I went to, I guess if I really loved the sport, I could have been more creative. But the high school I went to, I'll put it this way. The sports teams had a really, really deeply gay vibe. I
Oh
mean,
really?
yeah, it was, and the thing is, man, if there's one thing again, I'm sorry you have a religious program. Let me just try to say this in a very polite and respectful way. The kind of, I don't want to be involved in any sexual activity of that type
Right.
in any form. And the problem is, there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, hey man, give me a massage kind of stuff going on. And some of the coaches also, or at least the one coach, definitely that guy was very, very Nambla. And
Oh
so like,
boy.
by the time early high school started, I was like, this, if I was basically kind of like, if I continue with this, something bad is going to happen. And so
Right.
rather than maybe doing the smart thing and like trying a different school or something, I just kind of like just backed away from all people to not be involved in any of this sort of homosexual nonsense.
Right.
But yeah. So homosexuality actually killed my sports career and made me pay for college, which is something you probably haven't heard often. Uh, but so anyways, so I kind of felt like I had this sort of like, dream that was unrealized. And ever since I've been, came to Russia, I've been able to accomplish a lot of my dreams, man.
That's
And I was, let's
awesome.
do this one. Let's rock and roll. Let's just do this one. And so after the surgery, I get out, I get out of these pins in my hand, wrap up my hand in tape, and I'm going out there to block one-handed. One hand down, one hand up, all catches, one-handed catches, still on the practice team. By the time the actual season rolls around, the first season, they took the pins out of my hand. So by the first season, I
Wow.
was actually sort of ready to actually go. And thankfully, God willing, there's actually right by the training field, there's a particular white church that I always pray to. And the prayer is just that I ask God, I want to survive till I'm 50. Because some of the real tough guys in American football here make it to 50. That's like the goal. So that's all I ask for. I don't ask to be the greatest player. I don't ask, especially to win. I really don't like when people ask God to help them win sports events that
Right.
don't. It doesn't matter, man. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong again. And I'm not a theologian, but it feels wrong to do it. To ask,
Right.
please help me survive. I think that's more reasonable. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so and so then I started playing, and I definitely wasn't the worst guy, and I definitely didn't get cut. And here it is. What is it? Season number 5 now? Maybe season number 6. I don't even remember.
That's awesome.
But yeah, and in fact,
And you
last year I
guys
don't
have
have the
won
thing
like
with me,
you
but
get your team has won the last like 4 in a row, right? I was hearing.
yeah, but again, I don't play for the starting team, unfortunately, because of my age. I'm in the reserve, and they've never called me up from the reserves to play in the Russian Super Bowl, despite the fact that I've seen 4 of them. So I sent you the link to our group on Telegram. You can see the matches there.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, so I didn't make it to ever make it to that championship game, but there were some. So we have a development team. So we have like a main team and then the development team, like the sort of back. We're a big organization. There's like over 100 guys.
Oh
So I
wow.
sort of play for the development team because no one has to pay me. So you're not losing anything. I'm just sort of there as like, hey, we need a tight end today. Oh, you can, you're the tight end. No one wants to play center. Okay, you're the center.
Right.
And that's what I do at practice. But for the development team, I'm pretty stably at guard. But anyways, so this year finally there were some problems with like some league bureaucracy, and then the whole like a pandemic nonsense kind of got in the way. But anyways, the development team we have actually has good results too. And finally this year, like 2 months ago, I finally got to play in the championship game of the sort of D league there, the development league. And so we won that. So the main team won the
Wow.
Super League, and we won what's called the second league. So yeah, so I actually got the big medal, and I got to show it to my son and all that, who's one hell of an athlete. He's way beyond me, man. And so that was like, childhood dream come true.
That's
And then it was
awesome.
yeah, and it was an away game. We had to go all the way down south to Novorossiysk, so it was 1,000,000 degrees. It was in August. It was an away game because we lost a game this year against the Capital Sharks, who are one heck of a team. They shouldn't be in the development league. They're an absolutely fantastic team. I wish them the best. They know what they're doing. Maybe they just need a couple more guys. But anyways, we did it, and it was probably as an adult man, it's the been one of the hardest moments of my life not to cry. You know,
That's awesome.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
so awesome. So you said in there that you have accomplished a lot of your goals and dreams since moving to Russia. And I think that would be something that would be really good for my audience to hear because we hear about, like, oh, the United States is this land of opportunity and all this. And there's kind of this mentality that everywhere else in the world, life is just really difficult. And then in the United States, it's just great.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's good for people to kind of get a little bit of a corrective to that. So, what are some of the things you've been able to accomplish in Russia that you couldn't accomplish in the US? And kind of walk me through some of that.
Well, to be fair to all parties involved, maybe I just didn't get something. Maybe I was part of the problem in America. I don't know, but but some of the things I wanted to do, like I said, was as a kid, a little kid, the dream was American football. We just talked about that.
Right.
When I was more of like a high school age or in college, the dream was to be able to work in or at least kind of write about ideology, kind of become sort of like a Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski kind of character, except not evil. Brzezinski,
Right.
quite the evil individual, but
Right.
someone who's kind of like that. But again, as I mentioned before, I'm from the ghetto, baby. I didn't come, there was no there was no Ivy League education waiting for me. Then again, people like maybe Thomas Sowell, if he's listening, he's probably not, but if he was, he'd be like, well, you were lazy. I got into Harvard from Harlem.
Right.
There are people who do it, but I was way too
You didn't
one
know
problem we
about
had.
anything like
Yeah,
that.
well, one problem we have in the Black America that I'm come from, that I have as well, that Black Americans do, and that almost all Russians do, is a very pessimistic outlook on the
Right.
future. And I definitely, I do not have that like white American guy thing of like I can do anything if I believe in it. Like if you're from the ghetto, you're beat in your mind that like they'll never let you succeed. It'll never happen. You'll never
Right.
get into Harvard. You'll never do this. That's what makes the ghetto the ghetto. It's one thing that's really good about America, because one thing that actually is really sort of unique about America, if you talk to people from all over the world, which I have, that sort of American attitude of I can do it, is
Right.
actually really pretty unique to like America, Canada. Even people from England are a little bit more like medieval serfish about their sort of status in life, which is kind of surprising. Not to the degree that, say, Russians are or like Chinese people are, but they still
Right.
feel kind of like a step down from American optimism. So there are some really awesome things about America. But anyways, we were talking about what? I lost my train of thought.
No, you're good. I was just kind of asking, like you said that you've
Mhm.
accomplished a lot of your
Oh,
dreams.
accomplished. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, yeah, like I said, I wanted to write about ideology. And so I did, until I got a warning from the Department of the Treasury that although I didn't violate sanctions, potentially by continuing to write for the Strategic Culture Foundation, I could.
Okay.
And I have a lot of relatives in America, and I don't want them to get punished for me. Again, we're turning
Right.
into North Korea, so I had to sort of back off that. So Russia gave me my dream to be able to work with great intellectuals of our time. Martin Seif, Alistair Crook, who else from the Strategic Culture Foundation? Pepe Escobar. Um, a lot of really genius people of our time have contributed to that. And now, at least for the present time, I really can't. However, thanks to what I call the donation machine, I get a lot of donations from people and I can still do political material and develop in that way. So that was kind of a dream. In fact, I had one girlfriend who I have no enmity towards. In fact, uh, she was an honest person. But one thing she told me, she was like, no one is ever going to listen to you. What are you doing? Why do you want to do this? Stay in Russia. No one's ever going to listen to you about your political opinions. No, no. I turned pro, baby. So that was one thing with that was kind of one moment where someone was like, you won't do it. And then I was like, yes, I will. So that was, I guess, very American, in that
Right.
sense. Um, yeah, so that was that. Oh, I own at least 3 pieces of real estate, which is good coming as someone who came here with $200 in their pocket.
Right.
So, and I got kids in the whole 9 yards, and
That's
yeah, so that's one of the
awesome.
problems is, and also, I used to, I still travel a lot and I like it, but when I was in my 20s, I loved it. Okay. Now that I'm getting a little older, as you get older, you get more in sort of nest mode. But when
Right.
I was in my 20s, I was nuts about travel. And yeah, I've traveled like all over the place, man. Russia has 89 states. I've seen 60 of them, you know.
Whoa.
Yeah. So that's a real dream come true. Oh, and to be honest, like working in the media is something that I also really enjoy. And like, a lot of times whenever I get frustrated about my whole sort of career in the media, which has a lot of frustrations because working in the media also means please finance this idea. Please give me money.
Right.
Please approve this. Please, please, please. Not the most masculine position to be in all the time. The
Right.
beggar. But what can you do? But besides that, I always try to remember that, like, I could be working in a mine. I could be working at McDonald's. I could be doing something absolutely horrible that's physically
Right.
destructive, So
Exactly.
it's cool because I actually really liked working with my hands. But when I started to be a delivery truck driver in America for a company that does pipe fitting and ventilation work, I saw on like a lot of job sites these like really old general laborers and stuff. And I'm looking at these guys in their 60s and 70s. Not you might think some kind of like Mexican guys. No, I mean like born and bred American guys, be they white or
Right.
black, like native to Ohio, and they just look like the Walking Dead. And so that
Oh
was one other
no.
thing where it's kind of like, boy, this job of like becoming like a pipe fitter or something, this is going to be fun, but I bet when I hit 40, it is going to be a quick downhill slope.
Right.
So that also kind of had an influence on me because I do like doing things with my hands, but it doesn't pay that well. It kind of does, depending, but it's beats people up, and people
Right.
live long nowadays, and I don't know. So yeah,
That makes perfect sense. So
yeah,
you've traveled to all these places, so you've seen like all the different facets of Russian life then, like
oh
the
yeah,
little village life and the big city life.
yeah.
Like what is describe for me a little bit about kind of the difference between not just the difference between Russia and the US, but even the difference of diversity within Russian culture and life.
Oh, well, when I tell people who want to visit Russia, I tell them that to see Russia, they have to do three things. They have to go to one of the big cities, be it St. Petersburg or Moscow. They have to go to some sort of Russian small town that's not St. Petersburg or Moscow. You can get to
Okay.
some that count by like suburban train from Moscow. There's plenty of places. That's where I live, Chekhov County, baby. And then you should go see one of the ethnic republics where the people are like different, and I think that that gives people a pretty broad view of what Russia is actually like, because it does seem to sort of compile roughly these three worlds of this sort of like extremely modern, cafe filled, big business filled super cities. There's a couple of those. There's a lot of, the sort of small towns, the heartland of Russia, where life is very different and it's a different speed and a different style, and the people are very different. And then you get into the ethnic republics where you get into a republic that's Islamic or Buddhist, or, where shamanism, actually, there's a couple of those where shamanism is very dominant. And, it really is very, very visually different.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's all really interesting to me. I know that you don't have a ton more time, so I
We can
will.
do 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes because then, yeah, I could need like a 50-minute break before the next thing. But maybe you have some other, or I could say one thing here. Let's talk about one thing about
Okay,
Russia. The thing that might be the
sure.
most surprising to Americans is that everywhere that I go, and one of the things about Russia is that it's very eclectic. So you go
Okay.
outside these major cities, right? Because anyone can put lipstick on a pig and make a few nice buildings downtown. When you go out of
Right.
them, you start to see houses. And some of the houses are old and beat up, and they're from like the 1800s. Some of them are like more modernized. Someone put up some new siding. You can tell the roof is new. Someone tried to the best of their ability, given their resources, to fix it up. And then right next to those houses, brand new ones, brand new. I
Really?
don't want to say McMansions because they're made of concrete blocks, but your concrete giga block houses exist too. And this is everywhere. It's not just Moscow. It's all over the place. In fact, there's sort of a big migration towards, especially after COVID, towards living a suburban lifestyle. Yeah, so you definitely see that. And also, as you travel around, you can see that certain places are really succeeding, like Vladivostok, because now that Russia has to work with Asia, it is so much easier for people like the Kim from North Korea to visit
Right.
Vladivostok than Moscow, or Xi Jinping to come up, or all the other, partners and all that. Vladivostok is very much like Russia's San Francisco, only extremely heterosexual. You see kind of places like that. You go up to Blagoveshchensk, which is on the river between Russia and China, and you just see grain food, mineral resources, and of course, via wires, electricity going from Russia. And on the other side, you see boats filled with excavators and tractors and cars going the other direction. You can
Wow.
see just the trade all day long, barges, boom, boom, boom. If you go down to Chechnya, you see an extremely Islamic place that is still secular and people aren't like nuts or anything. And it would really open the minds of a lot of people of what Islam can be like. And also, it's a place in Russia where the temperature gets up to 40 Celsius, which I forget is in Fahrenheit. It's like over 100 or something. It's
Right.
nuts. You're still in Russia. It is nuts hot down there during summer. And then you get over to again, weird places like the Crimea, which is just a very weird place because it looks like Greece. Like the atmosphere is like Greece, the plants are like Greece, everything looks like you're
Really?
in Greece or Cyprus or somewhere like that, but everyone speaks Russian. So it's bizarre. It's absolutely bizarre. And of course, I've been up to the Great White North a couple times with the whole, where people some people live off elk blood and all that stuff. That's pretty crazy. But the Great White North is definitely not for me, man. Every time I take a trip up there, just going there for 2 or 3 weeks, I come back like physically and morally beat up. I don't know how the Eskimos and we visited the place where the Eskimos live and the place where the Nyensi live, and I don't know how they do it. It is an absolutely brutal lifestyle.
Wow. Now,
Yeah.
do they in the Great White North, do they have like the same kind of thing as Alaska where the sun isn't super reliable to be there all year round?
Well, to be honest, man, that's St. Petersburg. That's why every summer in St. Petersburg
Really?
there's a holiday called White Nights when there's like 3 or 4 days of no darkness. And so it's kind of
Really?
like St. Petersburg, like everyone parties and there's concerts at night in quotes, and stuff. Yeah, it's a big like festival thing. So even in St. Petersburg, that's the case.
That's crazy
Yeah.
cool.
Because if you
Wow.
look on a globe, I hope I'm not lying to you. I believe that something like maybe Juneau or Anchorage, Alaska is on line with Moscow. So like the lower
Really?
part of Alaska that sticks down, that's actually where Moscow is.
Huh.
So like where I'm
Wow.
from, Ohio is on the latitude line, I believe, of Tbilisi, Georgia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That
So we're
actually
way
makes
up here.
sense.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So all those characters in Dostoevsky books and stuff, they're when they talk about like the White Knight, they're just partying it up, man.
Yeah, well, I don't know about back then. Modern Russia's, of course, much more lax in its morals than in the old days. But yeah, it's a real thing. In fact, it's a big tourist thing. People go up there to
Really?
party specifically. Yeah.
That's
And I
awesome.
believe that at the end of that, they have the Scarlet Sails thing where there's a boat that has like blood red sails that comes by, which is to somehow represent that cadets graduated from the Naval Academy for some reason. I'm not quite sure how this all
Oh,
ties in, but that's another thing that's like a big thing. And of course, because when you graduate from the Naval Academy, you're what, 20 or something or 21.
right.
So it's party time, baby, for because they're all young guys.
Right, exactly.
So yeah.
Do you get really excited when you encounter like a tourist or something from America and get to speak in English with them?
No, because the last time that happened, they were Mormon missionaries.
Oh,
And
darn.
I kind of had to hold back because one thing in Russia that is you might be surprised by is proselytizing of any religion is really, really looked down upon. Why? Because it's a lot easier to have this sort of multi-ethnic country where people kind of go, oh, okay, we go over the line to the Czech Republic. That's going to be more Islamic and that's going to be dominant. Okay, we get it. We're cool. They come over the line. It's going to be more Christian rules. They have to understand
Right.
that. And when you get into the Protestant thing, it starts to get aggressive and it starts to create ethnic conflict. And so proselytizing is really, really gets a bad reaction from people, especially the cops. So again, talking about religion, awesome. Having a million churches everywhere that are being refurbished every day is awesome. But going on some sort of like proselytizing spree where you're like pulling people off the street to harass them into your religion is definitely a no-no. Ultimately, though, I really do not meet very many random foreign people that much anymore. Yeah. So I don't know.
It-
Also, I don't really have much of a loneliness problem because I'm kind of a D-list celebrity. So I trust me, man, I get enough human interaction. Oh, wait, sorry, I always forget. I've become Russian. This means in Russia you've had enough. So that's kind of like my feeling a lot of days. Like today, I already had to have like 3 massive online arguments with people who have some criticisms for me. So it's like, I don't know. I know plenty of people, and I'm getting
You're not
older,
looking for
and
any new friends.
there's a reason, man, why I chose to buy a house in the woods.
Makes
Yeah,
perfect sense.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing this today. And if anybody has any questions for Tim, you can feel free. I'll put a link
Yeah.
in the description below where
And,
you can reach
and
out to him
and let me get in
if
some
he's okay
plugs,
with it.
man.
Yeah,
Tim Kirby's Travels on YouTube. Tim Kirby's Travels. You can also find me on Rumble. All the videos are there too. You
nice.
can find me if you want to talk to me. You can find me on VK or on lovely Telegram. And if you want my more political side of my bizarre worldview, go to look for Tim Kirby Russia Hardcore on Telegram. You'll find it. My big fat face is the icon, so you can find it.
All
Mhm.
right, awesome. I'll
Yeah.
make sure to have links in the description below for that. And I'll also have a link for the Rumble page for the American football in Russia so that you
Oh,
guys can
all
see
right.
that.
All right. Let me
Exposing
then.
people to culture.
All right. Fantastic. In fact, because I'm a forgetful individual, I'm gonna send you the link to my Telegram right now because that really helps. That's where all the political stuff is. They make a lot of sort of political kind of live streams and all that, and if people want to hear
Awesome.
that, they can hear that. But yeah.
Well, I'm glad. I'm glad. Well, God bless and share this with your friends so that they too can be freed indeed. God bless.